On a cold November night in 1978, four young employees working the closing shift at a Burger Chef restaurant in Speedway, Indiana, disappeared. Hours later, the restaurant was found unlocked and abandoned. The safe had been tampered with, but their belongings were still inside. What started as what looked like a petty robbery quickly spiraled when the four missing employees were found in the woods, brutally murdered. Despite countless leads, theories, and actual confessions, no one has ever been brought to justice. This is the mystery of the Burger Chef murders. Hi, my name is Tasha, and this is my series White Rabbit, where we deep dive into anything spooky, odd, or just interesting while I apply some special effects makeup. Today's makeup is the cutest cow ever. I wanted to stay away from anything too dark since today's story is really dark, so yeah, I settled on a cute cow. If you like this content, be sure to hit the subscribe button and leave a little cow emoji in the comments. I will have my other socials linked below just in case you want to see me in the wild.
This is pretty wild.
And with that out of the way, let's jump into today's story. Friday, November 17th, 1978, four employees were working the closing shift at a Burger Chef restaurant in Speedway, Indiana. Burger Chef was a really popular fast food chain in the 70s and 80s. An interesting fact, when Burger Chef came on the scene, they were basically giving McDonald's a run for their money. Even though McDonald's had been around for over a decade, the public was obsessed with Burger Chef. First, because they had this burger bar where you could just put on all of your toppings yourself. But the big draw was this thing they had called the Fun Meal. The Fun Meal came with smaller portions for kids, and it came with a burger, a drink, fries, a dessert, and a toy. 6 years later, McDonald's came out with the Happy Meal, and I always thought McDonald's came up with that gem, but it was actually Burger Chef, who is no longer around. They were actually bought out by Hardee's. Anyway, back to November 17th, 1968. The four employees that were closing the store were Jane Freet, Daniel Davis, Mark Flemons, and Ruth Shelton. Jane Freet was 20 years old, and she was the assistant manager that was on duty that night. Jane was one of 5 children, and she was described as very sweet, but also very responsible. She had been working at Burger Chef for years, and she had just made her way up to assistant manager. Jane had moved out of her parents' house. She already had her own apartment, and really she was just beginning to spread her wings. Daniel Davis was just 16 years old, and he was described as quiet and hardworking. He loved photography, and he also loved planes. He actually had a plan to join the Air Force as soon as he graduated high school. Daniel had recently started working at Burger Chef. They hired him on as a cook, and he was so new that he hadn't even got his first paycheck yet. Daniel wasn't actually supposed to be closing that night, but at around 9 p.m. he called home, and basically he said that he wanted to pick up some extra hours because Christmas was right around the corner and he was still saving for Christmas presents. Mark Flemons was also 16, and he was described as the polar opposite of Daniel. He was lively, outgoing, funny. He was one of 7 children, and he actually had a sister that worked at the same Burger Chef as he did. She even worked that same day, but she was just scheduled off earlier than he was. To be correct, he technically wasn't even scheduled for that day. He agreed to help one of his coworkers out and take her shift, but then at the last minute, he tried to change his mind, and his manager was like, "No, you agreed to it, you have to come in." So that is the only reason he was there that night. Mark not only had the pleasure of working with his sister, but he also worked with one of his best friends. He was very close with Jane. Jane even told people that when Mark was around, she had nothing to worry about because she felt safe and like he was just her protector. Then there was 17-year-old Ruth Shelton. Ruth was a really quiet girl. She was smart. She was creative. She was not only an honor student at her high school, but she also took music courses at a local college. Ruth did have a younger sister, and they were very close. Her sister said that she would describe Ruth as the perfect teenager. Before Burger Chef, Ruth was working at the Dunkin' Donuts, which was right across the street. I think she had only been at Burger Chef for a few months before this happened. So at 11 p.m., they locked down and they started performing all of the closing duties. Just before midnight, an off-duty Burger Chef employee, he was riding past and he wanted to stop in and see his friends because they were all friends. And he knew they wouldn't hear him if he knocked on the front door because all of that would probably be closed down. So he immediately went around back. And when he got around back, he saw that the back door had been propped open. And that was like an immediate red flag to him because he knew that there was no way that that door would have been left open like that. The only time the door is propped open is if somebody is walking out to take the trash and just walking right back in, and then they would close it. When the employee walked in, the first thing he noticed were that all of the cash registers had been pulled out and they were on the floor. He walked into the manager's office and he noticed that the safe was open, all of the money was gone, but Jane and Ruth's jackets were still there and their purses were still there, but there was no sign of anybody that should have been closing that night. So this guy starts freaking out because he knows that this is not a good thing. He finally calmed himself down and he called his manager. His manager told him, "Call the police immediately, I'm on my way." When the police arrived with the manager's help, they were able to determine that there was $581 missing. Interestingly enough, there was $100 in rolled coins that was left behind, and also the girls' purses were left behind. Now, before I go any further, I just want to say that the police were very, 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 very heavily criticized about the way that they handled this case.
Damn it! Damn it! Damn it!
And you probably know the direction that this is going. Initially, the police thought that this wasn't very serious. I know. It was their belief that all of the workers got together, stole all of the money, and went out for a night of partying. That just literally sounds so stupid. But this was their theory and they were pretty much sticking to it. But the manager of the Burger Chef, he was saying there's absolutely no way. That doesn't make sense. And also these kids would never do that. Every single one of them was so responsible. He kept telling them absolutely not, but the police just weren't budging. He told the police that it would be so unbelievably out of character for any one of them to do that, knowing that they would 100% get caught. Just use Jane for an example. She had been working at Burger Chef for years. She worked her way up to assistant manager. She'd only been assistant manager for a few months and they already started training her to be manager. Why would she ruin her whole career path by robbing her own restaurant? It just made no sense, and the manager was pretty upset that the police were taking this so lightly. The police were taking it so lightly that they took no photos, no fingerprints. They didn't even close the restaurant down as a crime scene. They even instructed the staff that was coming in for the next shift to scrub everything down and just prepare for opening as they normally would. They told them to clean. So this horribly idiotic decision obviously removed any trace evidence that was there. The police did notify the parents of everyone there that they were missing and they were asking them, where would they go? Do you have any ideas? They even got together a small search party to help look for them. The next day, it became pretty apparent that their first assumption was absolutely ridiculous and that something was very wrong. They started searching by helicopter and the FBI even got involved because this was the abduction of 4 people. Speedway police, in light of their horrible mistake, decided to go back to the Burger Chef restaurant and restage the crime scene as they remembered it. Then they took pictures and sent them to the FBI, trying to pass them off as the actual crime scene photos.
This is unacceptable.
The FBI, being the FBI, immediately noticed that there was something weird about the pictures, and they were questioning a lot of things in these photos. So eventually, Speedway police had to admit that the pictures were fraudulent, and they had to explain why they did not have crime scene photos. Jane's 1978 Chevy was found about a mile and a half away from the Burger Chef, and investigators were really excited that they found Jane's car because now they had a shot at some trace evidence. The car was unlocked, all except for the driver's side door, and they immediately started looking for fingerprints, for blood, for hair, anything. They needed any type of clue because they had nothing. Unfortunately, after examining Jane's car, they still had absolutely nothing. The next day, which was Sunday, a man and his wife were walking through the woods on a trail when they came across 4 bodies, all in Burger Chef uniforms. This was about 20 miles away from the abduction site. The police rushed to the scene where they found the bodies of all 4 missing Burger Chef employees. And they were killed in pretty different ways, which led investigators to believe that this was a small group of perpetrators. Daniel Davis's cause of death was a gunshot wound. He had been shot execution style with a .38 caliber revolver. His body was found lying near the others, but the way he was found suggests that he may have been first to be killed. Ruth Shelton's cause of death was also a gunshot wound. Just like Daniel, she was found shot execution style with a .38 caliber revolver. The gunshot wounds to Ruth and Daniel suggested that they were killed just to eliminate witnesses. Jane Freet's cause of death was stabbing. She had been stabbed twice in the chest with a hunting knife, and it was so violent that the blade actually broke off inside her chest. Jane's attack was much more violent in comparison to Ruth or Daniel's, and that's why investigators thought one of 2 things. Either there were multiple killers or Jane knew her attacker personally. Mark Fleming's cause of death was blunt force trauma. He had been badly beaten with either a pipe or a really big chain. His injuries indicated a really violent struggle. Mark's body was also found apart from the others, suggesting that he may have almost gotten away before he was finally caught and overpowered. Mark had a really bad blow to his face, and just by the way his body was found, one theory that investigators had is that he actually did get away, and he was running so fast and so hard through the woods in the dark that he ran into a tree and knocked himself unconscious. They theorized that when he hit the tree, he landed on his back and actually choked on his own blood. And that's really sad because supposedly if he had just landed a slightly different way, he probably would have survived. He probably would have just been unconscious for a few hours. His blood would have maybe drained out of his mouth or his nose, and he probably would have survived. The coroner suggested that they were probably killed almost immediately after getting to the site. One really weird thing was that everyone still had their belongings on them. I'm talking about money, jewelry, things of value. But just like money was left at the restaurant, money was left on them. See, this is just so strange to me because you're desperate enough to rob a Burger Chef and murder 4 people. You only get $581. You leave $100 in rolled coins at the restaurant. You leave the wallet. You leave the money on the bodies. You also don't take their jewelry or anything of value that they had on them. Are you desperate or do you just want to kill people? Because I would think if you were truly desperate, you would take everything of value. Maybe not the jewelry because jewelry can be traced, but definitely the money. The scene was thoroughly searched by investigators, but just like the car, they really had nothing. They had one thing. They had a tire impression, but that was it. By now, the running theory of the investigators was that this was a robbery gone horribly wrong. They believed that the robbers, by either plan or opportunity, waited for someone to take the trash out, and that was the moment that they used to gain access into the Burger Chef. They also felt like it was possible that one of the employees recognized the robbers, and that's why they were killed. There were several other robberies of different fast food restaurants in the area, and even different locations of Burger Chef had been hit, but no one was ever killed. So this is how investigators developed the theory that maybe someone was recognized. By this time, the public was very aware of the case, and investigators finally started getting some leads that they could track down. And there was one particular lead that really piqued their interest. A tip came from this guy who went to pick up his girlfriend from work at the Dunkin' Donuts that was right across from Burger Chef. His girlfriend got off and they were sitting on the railroad tracks, either smoking or about to smoke, when they were approached by two men. The two men approached them, questioning them, asking them who they were, what they were doing out there so late, and one of the men was covering the bottom part of his face with a handkerchief. The man with the handkerchief over his face even asked them for ID. They told him that they didn't have any ID, and he basically told them that they needed to get out of there and that there had been some vandalism in the area. They really shouldn't be out that late. They felt it was really weird, and when they left, they looked back and noticed that he was watching them to make sure that they left the area. Police had composite sketches done of the two men, and they turned those into full clay busts to release to the public. The first man was described as a white male, medium to heavy build with a full beard and dark hair. He looked to be in his mid to late 20s. The second man was described as a white male, medium build with light colored hair, and he was clean shaven. He appeared to be in his early to mid 20s. These busts were shown on TV and they were printed in newspapers, and they really generated a flood of tips, but unfortunately none of them ever panned out. Within weeks, police started receiving tips linking the murders to a local robbery gang that had been active in the area. The gang was known for hitting restaurants and fast food chains, and one of the gang members was even bragging about being involved in the Burger Chef murders. But after investigating, police could not find a shred of evidence that tied this gang to the murders. At one point, an informant had popped up stating that the murders were committed by 3 different men not in the gang. According to the informant, they were also men who regularly robbed fast food restaurants around Indianapolis. Allegedly, these robbers only planned to take the money, but then Mark started to resist and things just spiraled out of control, leading to the killing of all 4. Police looked really long and really hard into this story, but once again, there was just no evidence to prove this. Then a separate tip came in suggesting that this was not a robbery at all. This was actually a drug deal gone horribly wrong. The assistant manager, Jane, was rumored to have some kind of connection with the local dealer. It was said that one of the killers confronted the group that night over some missing product, and things just went sideways. This theory never gained much traction because there was nothing linking Jane or any of the others to any dealers or any illegal substances. I think they were basing this on the fact that Jane's brother was actually a small-time dealer, so they were just trying to somehow wrap her up in his mess. The Indianapolis Star newspaper ended up receiving a letter stating that there were 3 men involved in the Burger Chef robbery, but only 2 of them committed the murders. Allegedly, it was supposed to be a simple robbery, and they were going to take the employees to the woods, tie them up to a tree, and just leave them. 2 of the robbers went to go tie the employees up to trees in the woods, and one stayed in the car as watch, and supposedly this 3rd robber was horrified when people started being murdered. The writer of this letter said that he knew the 3rd man, and he felt like if he were offered immunity by the police, that he would probably come forward. Investigators, of course, released several pleas for this person to come forward, but they never did. Instead, the Indianapolis Star received another letter from this person stating that they were very sorry, but they could no longer help. Apparently, the 3rd person begged the letter writer to stop speaking with the police and the newspapers because he believed that even if he got immunity, that the 2 killers would eventually have him killed. Police did respond by offering this 3rd person immunity if he were to come forward and work with them. But unfortunately, whoever wrote those first 2 letters never wrote back. In 1984, investigators received a call from the cellmate of a member of a known Indianapolis robbery crew. His cellmate had confessed to him that he was involved in the Burger Chef murders. The story that this cellmate was telling police matched facts of the case that weren't made public. The name of the man's cellmate was Donald Ray Forrester. Donald was serving a 95-year sentence for the abduction and assault of a woman in Castleton, Indiana. When investigators spoke to him, he did admit to having information about the Burger Chef case. But investigators were a little skeptical because he was just about to be transferred to the state prison in Michigan City, and he was basically begging not to go. So at first they thought he could just be making up this information to not get transferred. They're always big and bad until it's time to be big and bad. So during an interview with Detective Mel Wilsey, Donald actually admitted to shooting Ruth and Daniel in the head with a .38 caliber handgun. He led investigators to the crime scene in the woods. He accurately described the position and location of the bodies. Donald also provided details about a broken knife handle that was found at the scene and the blade of that knife that was protruding from Jane's chest. And this was all information that had not been publicly released. According to Donald, the murders were tied to a botched robbery. He claimed that Jane's brother James owed a dealer some money. So he and his crew went up to Burger Chef just to threaten her and to rob them. So while they were threatening Jane, Mark intervened to kind of protect her, and they got into a physical fight. Allegedly, Mark was knocked unconscious and they thought he was dead. So in a panic, Donald and his accomplices abducted the rest of the employees and killed them so there wouldn't be any witnesses. Donald claimed that he and his wife collected all of the .38 caliber casings from the crime scene and flushed them down the toilet at his former home. When police went there and searched the septic tank, they found several .38 caliber casings. So things were like really lining up. They also found out in 1979, Donald's wife had called the tip line and said that her husband woke her up in the middle of the night, drove her out to close where the bodies were located, and had her help him search around for shell casings. I don't know how that tip got missed. Unfortunately, in November of 1986, the media got hold of this story and they basically leaked that Donald was working with the police. Donald recanted his statement, basically saying that the whole confession was coerced. He no longer would cooperate with law enforcement, and unfortunately, without his cooperation and without more evidence, they couldn't file any charges. Donald passed away in prison due to cancer before he could change his mind, and that was the last update on this case. Donald's guilt or innocence is highly debated. A lot of people believe that he just wanted to avoid that prison transfer. In my mind, I pretty much feel like the case was solved. I mean, especially because he talked about Jane and the broken knife handle and the knife actually sticking out of her chest. That was not information that was released, so how else would he know that? Also, the shell casings that were found in his septic tank and the fact that his wife called police in 1978. I believe him. I just believe he got really spooked when his name got leaked to the media as an informant. Drop your thoughts and what theories you believe in the comment section. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you down another rabbit hole.